Hello everyone, in this video we are going to create this simple tip calculator using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So this is a very simple app. Here we can enter our total bill, then we can choose our tips here from the percentage, and we can split the bill into different persons. Suppose we want to split it into 2 persons. Let's calculate, and here we got the amount. So if we put 100 here, we can see if it works or not. So it's 7.50, that means half of 15, so it is working perfectly fine. And if we miss any of the fields here and then click the calculate, it shows us alert to please enter values. So this is a basic JavaScript project. If you are just learning JavaScript, then this video is for you. It's not for advanced level developers. So without any further ado, let's get started with the codes. So here I have opened the folder with VS Code, and it has 3 files for HTML, CSS and JavaScript. In HTML I have opened a boilerplate, and it has linked with the CSS and the JavaScript file here. So let's start with the markup. First I am going to open a container div, and inside this container there will be the title here at first, which is tipcal. Now after the title we are going to include a form with some input fields. So let's do that. Form, we are going to leave it blank because we don't need any actions here, and inside it I am going to open a new div with the class of control. Now the first input field is for the total bill, so I am going to put a label here which is enter total bill. Now let's put the input, but at first of the input there is a $sign. So I am going to open a P with the class of input and put the $sign here. Then I am going to add the input field. The type will be number. Let's ignore the name here, we can only give it an ID. So I'm going to give it ID of total bill. I'm going to use the camel case. Let's also add a placeholder of 0. So this is the first input field. Let's move on to the next one, and in this one I am going to put the input field for the tip percentage. I am going to again use the control div, and inside it we are going to add a label. So it will be choose your tip. Now in here the input type is select and options. So let's add that select. Let's ignore the name and put a ID of tip percentage. So this will do. Now we are going to add the options here. So the first option I am going to give it a value of 0, and it will be the top option. So we can make it disabled and add a text of select from here. So let's make it disabled and also selected. So it will be selected by default. When the user will select any other options, it will be unselected. Okay, now let's move on to the next value, and we are going to use 30% here. So the value will be 0.3, sorry 3, and we are going to actually multiply this value with the total bill. So that's how we can get the percentage of 30%. Now let's copy this few more time. So 30%, then I am going to include 20, then 15, 10 and 5%. So let's also modify this. 5% will be 0.5, 10% will be 0.1, 0.15 and 0.2. So this is our tip percentage input. Let's move on to the next one, and we are going to add it after the form here. So now we are going to split the bill into the persons or the person numbers. So let's add a label for that. It will be split the bill into. After that I am going to put a input for the number. Let's add a ID of split, and after that let's add a button. It will be the submit button or the calculate button. Let's add a type of button. Sorry, this will not work. So let's use only the button, and the text will be calculate. Let's also add a ID of calculate. Now the inputs are completed. Now let's move on to the next one, which is the total tip. This section will display the total tip in the browser. So I'm going to put it inside a div with the class of total tip. Let's put a text here, total per person. After that we are going to display it. So let's add a class, let's add a p with the class of tip, and in here we need a $sign at first, then we can use the span, and I'm going to give it an ID of tip because we need to get it by the JavaScript to modify the results here. So for now let's select 0.00. So this is it, and I am going to open it by the live server. So this is the markup, and we are going to style it to look like this one. So let's move on to that, and I am going to minimize it. Okay, here we are. Now let's move on to the style.css, and at first we are going to add an font with it. So fonts.google.com, and I'm going to use this font redressed. It has only one style. The styling is not our main factor here. We are just going to learn JavaScript, not the stylings. So let's add it here and copy this. We can now close this. We don't need that anymore. Now let's add the body. Before that, let's add some universal styling of margin 0, padding 0, box sizing will be a border box. Now let's add the body and paste it here. So this has got the font styling. So we are going to give the body a height of 100 viewport height. So let's do that. Height of 100 viewport height, a background color of F9. Let's give the font size to 22 pixels and the position of relative. We are going to need the position relative with the body because we are going to make the container into the center position. So let's target the container and let's give it a position of absolute. From left, let's give it a value of 50%. From top, 50%. Now to make it properly centered, we are going to use the transform, translate, and minus 50% and minus 50%. Now it should be properly centered, and it is. So let's also give it a fixed height of 450 pixels. Let's give the background color of white, also a border radius of 18 pixels. Okay, now it is looking fine, but we can also add the text align to the center to make it centered, and I think it will be better if we add a box shadow with it. So I am just going to add the box shadow. Okay, now it is looking fine, and we are done with our container. Let's style this JSON. It is this text here. So let's target the JSON. Let's give it a background color of CEF5E4. Okay, it is not looking very great because we have selected it. Now let's add some padding with it. Padding, we only need the top and bottom padding. From left to right it should be 0. Now let's decrease the font size a little bit. I am going to give it a font size of 28 pixels. Now it looks fine. We can also give it a border radius to make it kind of rounded. Let's use the same value of 18 pixels like we have used it before. So this is it for the JSON. Let's move on to the paragraph tag. It is all the text here is the same paragraph tag. So we can give it a color of kind of grayish. So let's use 70. Okay, it's now kind of grayish and it looks fine. Now we have used the class of control to wrap all the controls here. So let's target that control, and I'm going to give it a margin at the top to bottom of 25 pixels. From left to right it should be 0. Okay, now let's target the input for this input and also this input, and we can add in beer tag here before the calculate. So let's add a beer to push it down to the next line. And for the input it has a default border and also a outline when you click on that, and we don't on that. So let's add the border, none, outline, none. Now they have no border and outline. Let's make the text align to center, and I'm going to add a border bottom of on pixels solid, and I have got a hexagonal color for it. It is on 6 A4 and 65. So this is our border color, and for the text I'm going to add the same color. Let's increase the font size a little bit of 28 pixels, and let's give it a margin to the top to create some distance with this paragraph tag here. So I'm going to use 20 pixels, and now it looks fine. But we have only styled this for the input field, these two, but we haven't styled the select here. It is the option field. So let's do that. It has the selector of select, so it will be almost the same. We can copy this for now. We don't need the text align center, and we also don't need the border bottom, but we can use a simple border here. Let's remove the text align to the center, and I think everything is okay. Okay, the text size is very big now. We need to make it reduced. So I'm going to use font size of maybe 18 pixels. Okay, it looks fine, but the color is not good. It is not looking okay, so we can just remove it so it will get the grayish color, or just let me use the grayish color. Okay, it is looking fine, but we don't want it. I think it's the autocorrect. Okay, we got it here. Now we are going to add some padding to make it look tolerable. So let's add a padding of 11 pixels to the top to bottom, and from left to right let's try 34 pixels, and we need to make it rounded. So let's make the border radius to 18 pixels. Actually I think we need more than that, so let's try 25, and it is looking fine. But if you want to make the void more larger or wider, we can do that. Let's try 70, 5%, and it is looking fine. We cannot do anything about this arrow icon because it is by default at the right side. So this is our values. So let's style this button here. So the button has a class, sorry, the ID of calculate. So we are going to target the button with the ID of calculate. Let's give it a border color. So let's style it. We are going to give it a color of white and also a background of this color we have previously used. Now it has some default border and outline, so we are going to change it. Let's change the border to 1 pixel solid and transparent for now. When you hover on that, we are going to change that. Let's increase the font size a little bit of 17 pixels. Let's give it a border radius of 18 pixels. Maybe it needs more than that, so let's try 25. We are going to need some padding here. I'm going to give it a padding of 14 pixels and 29 pixels, and now it's okay. We can also add some margin. So let's add a margin of 25 pixels. It will have some gap that way. So everything is fine, but we need to add a hover effect to make it more attractive. So let's add that. When you hover on that, we need to give it a color of this one. We are also going to change the border color to the same one, but the background color will be transparent, or let's use white. So I think it looks fine now. We can also add a transition effect with it to make it more subtle. So all 0.3 second is, I think it will look better now. So we can add a placeholder with it, otherwise it is not looking fine. So let's do that. Placeholder of on, sorry, let's use the placeholder of 0, otherwise people will get confused. Now we are going to style this tooltip or this div here. So let's do that. It has a class of this on, and I'm going to give it a background. This one is very deep, so we are going to use this color. Where is it? This is it. So this is the color. I'm going to just copy this. Now we are going to add some border radius of 18 pixels and a padding of, from top let's use 25 pixels. From left to right we don't need any padding, so use 0, and at the bottom 35 pixels. It will be more padding at the bottom. Now let's style the paragraph text here. It has the class of tip. So let's use the font size of 38 pixels, color of let's use a different color, 009855. Okay, it looks fine. Let's also has a margin top of 10 pixels to create some gap with the text here, and I think it looks the similar. So we are done with the styling. Now let's move on to the script. So now let's think about that, what we need. We actually need 4 things from here. We need the value from the input field, we need the value from this on here, then this on, and also the button. When we click on that, something will happen. So let's get this on first, and This calculate button has the idea of calculate. So I am going to create a variable using let, and let's name it calculate. Document dot query selector, this one, and as it has an id, you can also use get element by id, but I use query selector in all the cases. I think it makes the code simpler, not this one. It has the idea of calculate, but you can use whatever you want. You can use get element by id, get element by class name, whatever you prefer. So we are going to add an event listener with this variable. So calculate dot add event listener. The event will be click, and when I click on that, something will happen, and we are going to use an arrow function. It is just a normal function, but I like to use this way because it is so much simpler. We don't need to type the keyword function than any other things. So in this function, we are going to include all this input field value inside the variables. So let's use let and total bill. So it will be the same document dot query selector, and query selector, it is this bill here. It has the id of total bill. So it is not a class, it is an id total bill. So I'm going to just copy and paste this few more time. Now we need the tip percentage, tip percent, and it also has the id of this same one. And the third thing we need, or the fourth thing, is the split. I'm going to name it split, and it has the idea of split. Okay, we got the input field, but we actually need to put the value inside the variable. So for that we can just use dot and value. It will get the value from the input field. So let's do that with the tip percent and the split. Okay, we are done creating our variables. Now we need to validate something. So when someone click the calculate button before putting any values in here, so it will show an alert. So I'm going to comment it out. If the total bill is equal to blank, and we are going to use a logical or operator, it will declare all of the three items to move on. So total bill 0, then the next variable we need is the tip percent. Tip percent is 0, or the split is 0. So if any of this case happens, then it will show a alert message. The alert will be please enter value or values. Then we are going to return it. So this is our validation. Now let's calculate the tip here. For that we are going to create a new variable of total. It will be the multiplication of this total bill and tip percent. Total bill into the tip percent, and we are going to divide it by the split. Okay, I think the calculation is done, but there is some issues here. Suppose the result or the total here will be a decimal number. I'm going to console log it, so we can see the result. Let's inspect. Here is the console. So suppose we put a value of 853 and we choose a tip of 15% and split the bill into 7%. Let's calculate. Here as you can see the result is 18.2785 and some other numbers after the point, but we don't earn that much value. We just on two values. So we can actually do it by using two fixed. So let's use the variable total, and we are going to add it to fixed 2. So it will just keep the two values from the point or the two decimal numbers, and the other points will be ignored. Let's save and use the same thing, 853 15 and split into 7. Let's calculate now. It has trimmed all the numbers after the first two numbers. We are going to now display it. So let's do that. Document dot get element by id, we are going to use that. So we have the tip here, and we are going to change the inner HTML to this total. Let's save, and now let's try if this also not. 10% split the bill into 1, calculate, and 10. Let's make it 2 and 5. So this is perfectly working. And if you want to get the source code, I will upload it to the GitHub repository, and you can get the link from the description below. So don't forget to check it out. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and give the video a thumbs up. You can also click the bell icon down there to get update whenever I upload a new video. So thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video.